This video shows you how to use the create function on the drone mission converter. So once you hit the create icon, it will bring you to this screen, and as you see you have a dialog box on the right hand side. Incidentally, regarding this dialog, if you click outside of the dialog it will close it, and the top right hand chevron icon, if you click on that, that will reopen it. At the top of this dialog you have name. You will need to enter a name, and to adjust any of these fields in this dialog you simply tap on the text. So if I tap on name, it will bring up an edit field and I can enter a suitable name for the mission I'm about to create. Next we have the 2D and 3D radio buttons, so you can choose whether you're producing a 2D mapping flight or a 3D flight, and the parameters will change accordingly. The ground separation distance, or GSD, defaults to 2, that's 2 centimeters per pixel, and by clicking on GSD you can adjust it from 0.25 to 20, but typically you'll be using it between 1 and 5. The GSD is also related to the height, so if I set the GSD to 1, for example, the height is at the moment 56. If I set it to 1, the height is reduced to 28, so there's a linear relationship there. And also, if I adjust the height, it will adjust the GSD. The application assumes you're taking a photograph once every 5 seconds, and that has an effect on the forward overlap. But you need to understand there's a relationship between the height, the speed, and the forward overlap. So as you can see, the height is 56 meters, the speed is currently 3.36 meters per second, and the forward overlap is 0.7. If I now increase the forward overlap to 0.8, the speed has reduced to 2.24. If I decide to increase the height to 75 meters, for example, the speed has now changed to 3 meters per second. Bear in mind the relationship between height, speed and forward overlap. If I go back to a default setting of 2 on the GSD, which adjusts the height, that has set the speed to 2.24 with a forward overlap of 0.8, and if I adjust the forward overlap again to 0.9, you're flying at 1.12 meters per second, which is pretty slow. You can obviously adjust the side overlap depending on your requirements. The gimbal angle is set to -90 by default, so that's looking straight down, and if you're doing 2D mapping then that's probably what you're going to require, but you can change it to +45, so it's looking up at a 45 degree, and anywhere between that and -90. The maximum flight time you'll want to set as per drone, depending on its maximum flight time. If you're flying a Mini Pro 4, then 20 minutes is a sensible time to set. If you've got an Air3S, 25 minutes, maybe half an hour if you're lucky. But you can set it between 10 and 90 minutes, which is a ridiculous time. You set it accordingly as per drone. So let's create a mission. We've covered the dialog on the right, we'll get rid of that, and we'll navigate to a place we want to create a particular mission, so this will do. Now you simply tap on the map to define an area. So for example, I tap there, drops a marker, there, there. Now as you can see, it's defining an area, and I can just continue to add an area. Now I did that by accident, but it does demonstrate that if you create an intersection, that area is now invalid, and by hitting the dustbin on the left hand side, the dustbin icon, it will delete the last marker I left. And so I can continue to create an area, and I'm happy with that area. I can go and hit the checkbox or check button on the top left hand side of the screen, and the X button will delete everything. So if I press that, I'd have to start again. So I'll hit the checkbox and it calculates what it believes is the most optimal course angle. And as you can see, it's flying a Bezier curve between its waypoints. Now that's no good for mapping. So on the left hand side, you've got three options: curved, which is no good for mapping, straighter and straight. Curved is by default, but as I mentioned, it's not particularly good for mapping. So you have straighter, and if I select that, it has now generated lawnmower paths, but technically it is still a Bezier curve. I have added more waypoints, and the Bezier curve is restricted to the 4 at every corner, and then it flies a straight line to the next set of waypoints. Hence you get your lawnmower path. Now there's an advantage doing it this way, which I'll explain later, but I've tested this, it works well, and to be honest, I recommend you use this method. There is straight. Again, you get your lawnmower paths, and there are no additional waypoints, but I am using parameters that the consumer controller may not like. Although the parameters are there in the DJI documentation and in theory should work, the controller can get a little bit upset. Although if you download this to the controller, as you see it now, it will work and the drone will fly that route. But there is a problem if you save and exit that at the end of a flight, but I'll cover that later. So we've created a screen, and now I want to change the course angle. So I'll go and change that to about 270 degrees, that's fine. And as I mentioned, if you change the overlaps, that will change the entire flight time. At the moment, the forward overlap is 0.7 and you're flying at 3.36 meters per second. So I'm going to change the forward overlap to 0.8. And now that flight time has gone from just over 20 minutes to 33 minutes. And if I decide to change the side overlap to 0.9, then that's almost double the flight time. You know, be warned, although you may need to change the overlap to get better quality results, you can end up with much longer flight times. I'm going to change the side overlap to 0.8 for this demonstration. Now, so the total flight time is 33 minutes, which is too long for something like a Mini 4 Pro and possibly an Air3S. So what we can do is we can split this flight up. In the dialog, we've set the maximum flight time to 20 minutes. And when we select curved, the split option appears down the bottom left-hand corner. You don't get that option when you've selected straight or straighter, only when curved is selected. However, once you've selected curve and you select split, which will split the whole flight up into 2 flights, so you've got the 2 flights there, you can select straighter or straight. So as you can see, you've got 2 flights, and I recommend you select straighter for the moment. And now we can export those 2 flights. So the icon down the right hand bottom is now active, that's the export, and that will bring the dialog up just so that you can confirm the name. If you're happy with that, you hit the chevron and that will export 2 flights. And I'll show you how to load that into the controller later. If you wish to save a mission, you can do that by making sure it's on a curved flight, and then the save icon, which is halfway down the screen on the right hand side, becomes active. And then you can press that. The dialog appears just to make sure you're happy with the name. You then hit the chevron in the dialog and it will save that mission. So as we have now saved a mission, the open icon is now active. So we can select that, select the mission we wish to reload, and voila, there is the mission we had before. And then you've got all the normal options in the create screen available to you. Okay, so we'll now look at a 3D mission. So we select the 3D radio button and that gives us some different choices. We still have a ground separation distance, and relationship between the height and the ground separation distance still applies. So set the GSD to 1.5 and the height will reduce. The speed is in meters per second, and it's really up to you how fast or slow you want the drone to fly. Just take into consideration the light, possible motion blur. Yeah, don't fly too fast. The object height is fairly important because it will angle the gimbal to point at halfway up the object. So if you know the object height, great, or just take a reasonable guess. And again, the maximum flight time is there. That's actually for future improvement. At the moment, you cannot split a 3D flight, and most of them will happen quite quickly anyway. And again, at the end of a mission, you can return to home, land, whatever. Right, so now let's look at creating a 3D flight. So I'm going to zoom in. This is the needle in Glasgow green. Now I happen to know it's 43 meters high. So that's the object height set. I'm now going to add a center, and we go to the middle of the needle, and I'm happy with that. So I'm now going to select add flight path, and wherever I tap it will create a circle, so it knows the distance from the center to where I tap, and then that's the radius. It will create a circle around the center, and if I choose I can add another circle, and I can keep on doing this. So that has generated 3 circles. It will fly around each one. In each case it will adjust the gimbal in each circle to point halfway up the object. And again, we've got the save option on the right hand side of the screen halfway up, and actually I'm going to change the name. Test 3D 1. Okay, so it's saved that 3D mission. Now, circles are great if the object you're actually trying to photograph is round or square or vaguely circular. It may not be, it may be long and thin. So you also have the option, I'll delete that and create another one. I'll just change the name just so that we can distinguish between the two. Okay, we have a different name. I'm going to go off to this boathouse, which is long and thin, and a circle won't really cut the mustard there. So you have the option to add more than one centre. You can only add up to 2 at the moment, but nevertheless you can do nice long thin objects. Now wherever I tap, it will create, call it an oval if you like, but it's actually a circle cut in half and pulled apart, and it will fly that route round a long thin object. And again, you can create more. So you can handle nice long thin objects if that's necessary. Maybe in the future I'll enable you to add 3 centers, maybe something's triangular, but you've got 2 for the moment. And again, we can save that if I can hit the button accurately. Thank you. So that's basically how to create a 3D flight. And as you can see, the flight time there is only 6 minutes. And if I come out of that and then open the previous one, flight time there is 13 minutes. So it's unlikely that you're going to exceed the maximum flight time of Mini 4 Pro anyway. But as a future enhancement, I may well allow you to split that if need be. But we'll see how it goes.